Hello and welcome to episode 97 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. It's December, holiday music is on the radio, and as always, Wheel Reviews starts. And I'm going to do something different for this year's edition. I'm going to have some fun with this. I've been focusing, I do too much racing stuff for Wheel Reviews, and it gets to be tiresome after a while. But I want to just branch out and do stuff that I find interesting. Now, like many people, I watch pro wrestling. And as you know, one of the most well-known names in wrestling is Hulk Hogan. Love him or hate him, you can't argue he was one of the biggest stars of the 80s. You would think that being Hulk Hogan would be more than enough to not have to exaggerate your life story. Like, being Hulk Hogan should be more than enough to have cool stories, but no. Hulk Hogan is a narcissistic, pathological liar. His real name is Terry Gene Bollea, and he just got married to a Scientologist. Supposedly, you have to do an audit where you tell the truth, and I don't think he could pass it because he lies about everything. We're going to discuss some of Hulk Hogan's major lies, and this is not by any stretch of the imagination, as I don't have the time to devote to it. So I'm going to go through some of the more interesting lies that he's told over the years. These are from a number of sources, links in the description. Mike Tyson apparently was scared to face him in a boxing match because Hogan said that a pay-per-view bout between himself and Mike Tyson was supposed to happen, but it didn't because, quote, Tyson was too scared. Yeah, of Hulk. You ever see Hulk Hogan punch? He has the softest punches I've ever seen. Hulk Hogan claims he was supposed to be the face of the George Foreman Grill, and the reason he didn't get the offer was that he was out picking up his kids from school when the call came. Because that's how a big break works, right? Hulk Hogan claims he was asked to join UFC in 1993. The founders of the UFC have disputed this, stating that they never talked to him. In a related lie, he also claims he fought quote-unquote pride fighters in 1997 and even beat some in legitimate fights. The problem with that is Pride didn't launch until 1997. Now in 2021, Hulk Hogan pitched the idea that after he lost to the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6 in 1990, Hogan would turn the belt over, turn heel, and attack the Warrior. He said he would even been a heel on the level of Triple H, calling himself Triple H Hogan, but quote-unquote Vince vetoed it. Now we're going to talk about one of Hogan's oldest lies. So according to this story, in 1985, Hogan was defending the WWE title on a tour of Japan. One night, he faced Tatsumi Fujinami. According to Hogan, Fujinami, on advice by the New Japan bosses, tried to shoot or fight him for real and tried to steal the WWE title. Now this forced Hogan to fight for real and keep the WWE title from Fujinami. There's just one problem. There is zero evidence whatsoever that this was the case. And logically, why would New Japan have gone after WWE like that when they had a working partnership? Now, speaking of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Hogan has also claimed that his 1983 match with Antonio Inoki almost died, was brought back to life by CPR, and Hogan had to flee Japan to escape the Yakuza. Again, no evidence supports this, and it also does not explain how he was able to return to Japan many times in the following years with no issues whatsoever. This next one is, like, I don't even know how you could believe something like this about yourself. See, before WWE, Hogan was with the AWA when Verne Gagne began merchandising t-shirts. Now, it's actually a legitimate thing that Hogan jumped to WWE because there was a beef about profits from those shirts. Now, according to Hulk Hogan, WWE merchandising was his idea and his idea alone, and he had to personally sell Vince McMahon on not just the idea of merchandising, but of marketing, which ignores the fact that there were certain aspects of merchandise that were already being sold by WWE at that time. Hulk Hogan claims he was the inspiration for entrance music, despite the fact that World Class had already been doing entrance music way before that time. And even before then, there were also examples of entrance music being used throughout wrestling history. Now we're going to take up two of Hulk Hogan's lives, which are actually intertwined, because this came out recently and I was stunned by this. And let's give Hogan credit where credit's due. Yeah, he's a racist. Yeah, he's a narcissist. But he has, let's give him some credit. He has done a lot of Make-A-Wish stuff as well as other charity work over the years. One of Hogan's most outrageous tall tales is about SummerSlam 1992, where he states that he was in the United Kingdom and he met a Make-A-Wish kid who, quote, was in bad shape. Now, Hogan went out of his way to make sure the kid had a front row seat to the show, but sadly the kid passed away before his show. This would lead to the genesis of Hulkster in Heaven, which is one of his more well-known songs. There are some small problems here. Number one, Hogan wasn't in England. He wasn't at SummerSlam 1992. He wasn't even working for the WWE at that time. So none of this was true. Which leads to the second part of this lie, which just came out recently. This is an interview that he did from earlier this year. This is an exact quote. If I could make this kind of stuff up, I wouldn't be doing this. Quote, Simon Cowell originally came to the U.S. to help me with a wrestling album, and he never left. I was at Wembley Stadium meeting Make-A-Wish kids with Mr. T and Michael Jackson. By the way, there were no photos of these three together that I've been able to find. Do you know how epic that kind of a photo would have been at that time? Anyway, back to the quote. One kid in particular was in really rough shape. The EMTs were with him. He was on a stretcher. His body odor had a smell to it that I hadn't smelled in a while. His parents were freaking out. I knew he was in trouble. I said my goodbyes. I gave him a big hug and a kiss. I organized a nice place for him and his family. Ringside at Wembley Stadium. It was all roped off. I went to wrestle. I kept looking and looking, and the kid wasn't there. When I came back from wrestling, he said, "What happened to little fan out there?" And they told me, "Oh, the kid passed away." And I felt compelled to do something as a tribute right away. Now let me pause it right here. Remember, Hogan was not with WWE, he wasn't in England, he wasn't at Wembley Stadium, and he didn't wrestle at SummerSlam 1992. That's been established. Here's where this story goes really off the rails. Going back to the quote. My manager, Jimmy Hart, the mouth of the South, who used to be in a band and had a couple of #1 hit songs in the States. We stayed up all night together and wrote 12 songs for the kid's family. Jimmy knew somebody from Select Records that got a hold of Simon Cowell. He produced a little album for us. It went #1 on Billboard for 8 weeks. No evidence to support that, by the way. We donated money to the family. Then Simon came back and said we needed to do the song with a band called Green Jelly, and it was something called I'm the Leader of the Gang, a Gary Glitter song. I apologize for using that name, but that did really well on Billboard too. When we returned to the States, I had a crazy idea. Since I was wrestling, I might make music here too, so I grabbed Cyndi Lauper and Rick Derringer and a bunch of people, recut a ton of songs. Simon came over and helped me produce the wrestling album. Then he came back and produced the second wrestling album, Pile Driver, and he never left. He stayed here and became this monster producer. He's the nicest guy in the world. He plays a tough guy on TV. He's a real sweetheart. We're great friends to this day. In addition to all the other smaller lies that were in there, which is hilarious in and of itself, it's more or less been established that Simon Cowell never came to America at that time. He worked on the album from the UK. And I have to say this again. Hogan wasn't in England, he wasn't at SummerSlam 92, and he was not working for WWE at that time. So, Hulk Hogan, during his heel persona, called himself Hollywood Hogan. Now, this was done because Marvel Comics still owned the trademark to Hulk Hogan, so anytime he sold a t-shirt, they had to get a cut of the profits, so this was done to skirt around that. But he also loved to talk about his movie career in the late 1990s, which is just, It's a great career with such masterworks as Suburban Commando, Santa with Muscles, or Mr. Nanny. Hogan was close to being a B-list movie star. He came close, didn't make it. In his autobiography, he claimed that each movie had an awful script, which frankly they did, so he rewrote them themselves. Now, the Screenwriters Guild of America has apparently refused to give Hogan any credit because Hogan was a full writer. I don't think the SGA would do this. They probably wouldn't do it. And even if they would, do you honestly think anybody would want to take credit for writing Santa with Muscles, Mr. Nanny, or Mr. Nanny? I think they'd be more than happy to let Hogan take credit. I certainly would. Now, it's well known in life that Hogan had a real-life feud with the Macho Man Randy Savage. They did not like each other for decades. Sometimes they worked together, but they hated each other. They did reconcile before Macho Man's death, but it's still a rivalry that's expanded. Now, according to Hulk Hogan, he did play baseball in Little League, and then he played in high school. He claims that he was scouted by both the New York Yankees and the Cincinnati Reds until a broken arm ended his major league hopes. Now, number one, neither team has ever claimed to do so. And number two, it's kind of fitting that the Cincinnati Reds, who did scout the Macho Man Randy Savage, would be one of Hogan's choices for this story. Just think about that for a second. Now, Survivor Series 1991 is the genesis for one of Hulk Hogan's biggest lies. Now, Hogan and The Undertaker had a match where Hogan was given the Tombstone Piledriver on a chair. Now, Hogan claimed that he hurt his neck during the match because he hit his head on the chair. The Undertaker, at that time, the new guy on the block, believed him for 2 years until one day he watched the match, saw Hogan's head wasn't near the chair, confronted Hogan, who couldn't give him a legitimate answer as to why he claimed that. One of his more perplexing claims is that he was the first to praise Kevin Owens. In 2006, Hogan apparently saw Kevin Owens' first 2 matches in NXT and stated, "I went, there was a brother that's got heat. Everyone I talked to in WWE wasn't real high on him like I was. I said, no, I'm telling you, you give this guy a chance to get over, he'll grind." Now, first off, he wouldn't have made it to NXT if he wasn't talented. He was a 10-year veteran of the indie scene who is a former Ring of Honor world champion. And this was also during the time where Hulk Hogan was on the outs with WWE, and they wouldn't have listened to him. This one, I don't even understand the logic behind this. According to Hogan, he wrestled 400 days in 1 year. Yeah, I can hear your brains bubbling from here. Just hear me out. He claimed that he traveled so frequently between the United States and Japan that the time differences added up to 400 days. Number one, this is not only physically and scientifically impossible, because if you cross the international date line, when you cross it back, you'll get the day back. And number two, this also insinuates that whatever year this was, Hogan wrestled every single day that year, which is, again, impossible. Even like the old school, like the Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express, they weren't wrestling 365 days a year. They were wrestling 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes more. They weren't wrestling every day. Now, say what you want about Hogan, he did make a lot of money wrestling. He still does. I don't know how, but he still does. He claims that he lost, and I'm quoting here, hundreds of $1 million through a lavish lifestyle, and his costly divorce didn't help. Now, while that number seems high, I could theoretically believe that Hogan made over $100 million in his career. I would be more than willing to attest to that. Did he lose it all? Absolutely not. I don't think he doesn't seem to be begging on social media for people to for his GoFundMe. I'm just saying. So, WrestleMania 2. According to Hogan, John Belushi was at WrestleMania 2 and hung out with Hulk Hogan after the show, and Hogan outdrank Belushi. John Belushi passed away in 1992. WrestleMania 2 took place in 1986. Now, Hogan had broken ribs at WrestleMania 18. How he got them, well, let's just see. His original story was that he broke them during the Rock Bottom, but later he claimed that he broke them at a house show match with Rikishi before the event. Why would Hulk Hogan be wrestling at a house show at that point in his career? This is one, again, the dates just don't match up. So, Hulk Hogan was a professional wrestler in Memphis. According to him, not only was he a part of it, he was so popular that Elvis Presley would come to watch him wrestle and was a fan. Problem is, Hogan didn't begin wrestling in Memphis until 79. Elvis died in 77. Now, I mentioned his feud with the Macho Man Randy Savage. It was one of his great feuds in his career. They had great chemistry in the ring, but they had a lot of animosity outside the ring. And he was doing a documentary about Randy Savage. He claims that their backstage fight on Saturday night's main event was real, not a kayfabe fight, which, I mean, there probably was legitimate animosity there, but they wouldn't be fighting each other for real on camera. They're too professional. So, now we have to talk about the Montreal Screwjob, which, to shorten a very lengthy explanation, Survivor Series 1997, main event, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship. Bret Hart, champion, doesn't want to lose to Michaels. Bret Hart is leaving the company with 1 month to go in his career. So he backs Vince into a corner by refusing to lose to Shawn Michaels, who they have a lot of they have more personal animosity than Hogan and Savage did, if you can understand that. So Vince figures out a way to double cross him and screws Bret Hart of the WWE Championship. Well, Hogan was in WCW when the screw job happened. Yet for some inexplicable reason, he has a very clear recollection of what happened backstage at Survivor Series 1997. According to Hogan, this is a quote. Well, Bret Hart was supposed to lose to Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, whatever the hell it was, 16 or 17, I don't know, where all the fans were chanting, Bret screwed Bret. I'm going to take a deep breath and let that marinate for a second. So Bret told Vince McMahon, quote, I'm not losing to Shawn Michaels in Canada, and Shawn Michaels went out there, pulled a fast one, and Bret held him down and pinned him, and Bret couldn't do anything about it, and the so-called excellence of execution, who was supposed to be the greatest wrestler of all, little teeny Shawn Michaels held him down and embarrassed him, though. Bret was being a horse's ass, saying you wouldn't lose to Shawn and pin him anyway. How could this happen? How this version of events could possibly happen, especially with the video evidence of watch the event. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. Everyone knows what happened. Hogan was wrong. Michaels put Bret in his own submission move. Vince McMahon ordered the bell rang, and Bret Hart lost the WWE Championship. That's how it went. I was a fan at that time. I had access to pay-per-view. I watched that event. That's what happened. Nobody's arguing that. Now how Hogan's versions of events could possibly have happened the way he claims it does, despite the video evidence and the testimonies of everybody involved, is best left to the best scientific brains the world has to offer, because my brain is never going to be that powerful. Hogan wrestled Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. This led to a couple of myths that Hogan likes to spin. Myth number one is that Andre the Giant weighed 600 plus pounds at WrestleMania 3, even though he was only billed at 450 pounds. Hogan claims that he was closer to 600 at the time of the match. I don't think he was ever 600 pounds. A lot of people disagree with that. But Hogan also claims during that infamous body slam, he tore every single muscle in his back, yet he never missed a day at work. And many have said that Hogan's claim of 600 pounds was excessive. They said it was more like 450, but that hasn't stopped Hogan from spinning that tall tale. But Hogan also claims that the slam at WrestleMania was a last-minute call, and he claims it was supposedly called in the ring seconds before it happened. Hogan wasn't sure, in his own words, if Andre the Giant wanted to put him over, and he generally didn't know what was going to happen during the match. Problem is, everyone else seems to believe that that Andre was fine with putting over Hogan, and the body slam shot was done in house shows before the match. And I'm just going to a short little aside here, because I watch a lot of shoot interviews with old WWE guys. Apparently, when it came to body slamming, if Andre liked you, he let you do it. If he didn't, he wouldn't. Andre apparently took an instant disliking to King Kong Bundy, according to the late King Kong Bundy himself. Now, his third and most bizarre lie about WrestleMania 3 was that Andre the Giant died the very next night. This can be easily proven because Andre A. was in numerous WWE TV angles in several years, and he didn't die until 1993, which was WrestleMania 3 was 87. Andre didn't die until 93. Hogan was a bass player before he was a wrestler, and he claims he could have been in Metallica because he claims that Lars Ulrich came to Hogan himself and asked him to play with the group. But this has been proven false. In fact, according to Ulrich himself, he didn't know who Hulk Hogan was. Apparently, according to Ulrich, he only learned who Hulk Hogan was when Howard Stern asked him if the story was true in an interview. I could understand a decent chunk of the story, but explain to me how you don't know about Hulk Hogan in the 1980s. How do you miss that? He's not exactly subtle. Maybe I should do a Lars Ulrich lies video next. No, I'm not going to do that. So, at his appearance at WrestleMania 30, Hulk Hogan, The Rock, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, three of the WWE's biggest stars of all time, shared the ring and cut a promo, with Hogan being the first man out there. Hogan bizarrely claims that he has no idea that the other two would be there, but since the WWE TV crew were taping everything that was going on for their 24 series, they actually filmed them having a laugh before they were called to the ring. So I don't know where that lie comes from. Hogan claims that Darren Aronofsky offered him the lead role in The Wrestler 3 times, but he turned it down because he claims he didn't deserve it. Aronofsky categorically denies that Hogan was ever considered for that role. This is one where, again, I don't know why you would say something like just not being Hulk Hogan wouldn't be enough to be able to do interviews for the rest of your life. Hogan claims that he sat to Kerry Von Erich on a flight to Japan 72 hours before Kerry killed himself. Now, Kerry died on February 18th in 1993. 72 hours prior to this, Hogan was at the television tapings on February 15th at Long Beach, California, and the next day he was at the TV tapings in San Diego. Kerry Von Erich, on the other hand, was released by the WWE in '92 in August, and in the weeks leading up to his death, he was wrestling at the Global Wrestling Federation in Dallas. Our next claim is going back to Hogan's baseball, quote-unquote, career. He claims that he batted .714 on Little League World Series. This is an unheard of stat in baseball, let alone the Little League World Series. Above and beyond that, the Little League World Series have no record of him ever playing in their World Series, and you'd think with someone like that, they would promote it. I mean, they promote Austin Dillon periodically. Now, our last lie, and again, this is not a comprehensive list. I have a social life, and I have a personal life, and I'm not going to spend all of it combing through Hulk Hogan's nonsense. But the last lie is that he claims that the New World Order was his idea, and the original NWO would have included the Booty Man and the Nasty Boys. For those of you who don't know, the Booty Man is the Brutus the Barber Beefcake, who was Hulk Hogan's friend and early on tag team partner. Now, Eric Bischoff created the NWO, and he talked about how he came up with the NWO on many occasions. And furthermore, nobody in a position of power would have ever signed off on this idea in WCW. So that covered a lot of ground here. I'm going to conclude things now. I'll be back next week with another fun little segment. I'm Dave Fosling. Be like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.